Thank you, Mr. David, for that informative lecture. We will now move on to a panel discussion, which would involve Dr. Matthias, Mr. David, and Professor Wolfgang. And Dr. Amer al-Habsi will be the moderator for the session.
Hello. Okay, good morning. So this will be the fourth session, panel discussions. And we are glad to have Matthias, Mr. Wolfgang, David here. And we'll open the discussion. I'll ask for, you can ask the volunteers to just raise your hand to give to get you the microphones. But first, I listened very nicely to a presentation by Matthias, and for that, I'll be the first to ask about marketing. You talked about marketing. Microsoft, for example, Oracle, they give free software for students, so they start penetrating very early. And normally students, whatever tools that they're used to use, they continue using them after that. So what can the open source community do to do something similar to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. The problem with open source is it's already for free, so you can't do, well, you can, well, but so you can't give it for free if it's already for free. What I think the most important element, what I said is the association or who is promoting the software is doing marketing, but also, which I actually forgot to mention, I think it's very important that universities or governments or any other public society organizations do marketing. We, in Bern, for example, I'm now trying and talking to the head of IT that they actually do a open source.unibe.ch website. They have done this 10 years ago at ETH Zurich, or many other universities do already have this type of information platform, and I think that's very important because we have a lack and a gap of marketing and communication in open source, because communities, as David said, they're very strong in developing and growing, but often marketing involves different kinds of people who are used to be paid in a regular way, and it also has resources, need to resources. And that's, I think, government agencies like this event here, this is also a marketing and communication event for open source.
Okay, thank you. Another question is the freedom that we have with open source or with free software. There is freedom, and it's nice to have that freedom. Everyone can get software, fork it, do whatever. But is it that same freedom causing to have too many variations, too many distributions, too many options that it dilute, not having concentrated what's called a center or a direction to go along?
Yeah, well, you for sure are asking a difficult question. If you look at this family tree of open source distributions, you can get confused easily, for sure. It's really very confusing. It's huge. I think there are about 600 different distributions, and about 300, I think, are developed in an active way. So if you are not familiar with these things, you can get confused easily. But essentially, with regard to use in governments and businesses and universities, the situation is not so difficult. Essentially, from my point of view, from the end user, if you want to use Linux and open source systems, with regard to end user environments, a lot of people will recommend to use Ubuntu Linux. It's a very common distribution. Then you have if you have a banking business or a stock exchange, then Red Hat is frequently the choice. If you do not have the money to buy the Red Hat services, you can using CentOS. So essentially, if you know the situation with regard to all these different distributions in more detail, the choice is not so difficult.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I'll open the floor for questions from the audience. Just please raise your hand and introduce yourself and your affiliation. And okay, in the middle.
Ladies and gentlemen, to give an opportunity to speak my ideas and thinkings. I do believe for open source development, any development should start from the operating system itself. And I believe Red Hat and Ubuntu plays a significant role in this arena. So if universities can take any active role to free distributions of course it is a free open source, to distributions and to help the students as well as the technical peoples to use the Ubuntu and the pre-built operating system in their machines, if Ubuntu or Red Hat. So they will take an initiative to progress further in their developments. Myself is Bhavesh, and I am from Center for Information Systems. And I am actively developing open source softwares in Java, and I'm responsible for university portal systems. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so of course universities and the secondary schooling system play a very important role with regard to making open source systems more popular and to provide some education how to proceed with regard to open source. It's in my presentation, which will be right after the coffee break, I will especially address this aspect. I think it's especially universities have a very important role to play. Here in Oman, probably that would be the job of the Sultan Qaboos University. I think they have the resources to set up, let's say, sort of a center of excellence, which can be a core unit to generate and to distribute knowledge about open source systems, and especially the utilization of open source systems in different parts of government and industry. I think that should be a core job of a university, and I think it's required to have such a focal point, which is and a group of highly educated specialists, which can provide advice to businesses wanting to make use of open source systems and so on. Of course, all these community things are very important, but I feel in addition to having a lively community in the open source area, we for sure need a very professional group which is somehow positioned between businesses and research in the area of applied research, which can provide a backup with regard to open source knowledge, can provide pilot projects and these things. So universities, for example, could play a very important role in supporting the growth of the Foss area.
My question to Dave. Thanks for your nice presentation. As the people is the matter, so I would like to ask how to build a successful community here in Oman and how to involve free open source in our education system.
So it's always a struggle to figure out the best starting point, and where to begin. And what we've seen to be successful has been to organize rather informal small groups and to find a time that's convenient in that small group to meet on a rather regular basis and begin to foster a sense of community just within a small group. And once that grows from a small group, it can grow larger and larger. So usually what you'll see is maybe in one city you will have a meeting on a monthly basis, and you ask questions, and you get answers, and you offer each other support, and you grow in your knowledge together. And then as that community in that one little city grows, you'll have another one in another city, and another one in another city. And as it grows like that over time, what you'll see is that the overall global community will begin to grow and scale accordingly. It becomes a sense of helping one another and taking down the barrier of feeling like you have a dumb question, and instead making it a sense and fostering a community where every question is a good question. How can we better help each other? How can we better help this community to grow? So start small, grow big.
Okay. Just to follow up on that, how can we get for the community for more inclusion, to get the women? We have a very low rate of women in programming, so how can we get that part of the community?
I think it's actually very interesting you mentioned that, because I was just speaking with someone yesterday at the great diversity here in this conference. It was actually very impressive, so well done. Here it seems to be something that has been paid attention to and definitely is shown. I think it's a constant struggle. It's a constant dilemma, and it's something that, at least in the United States, has been becoming more and more a focus on how do we make sure everyone is welcome to code across gender differences. So I think that's something that, by paying attention, recognizing that there's a need there, we can focus on it and hopefully encourage it.
Yeah, I strongly want to support this idea. From my experience, I do a lot of teaching for a lot of years, and just 10 days ago, I was teaching at Kabul University, and I do teaching at different places in the world. And what I'm finding out, especially in the Eastern countries, is that female students are very much interested in information technology, and they are very good students, and there is no limitations in participating in coding. For example, last summer I gave intermediate level course on programming at Kabul University, and I think the female students did very well. So we just need to encourage the female students to participate. They will, as far as I know and as far as my experience goes, female students will do an extremely good job with regard to information technology.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
This is a question to David. You said when the community become large, do you mean only people from IT, from computer science background, or from other disciplines? Because I see that there is a gap. You have, when you talk about communities, it's always IT related. But I think Foss has grown to a point where it needs other disciplines to get other people, on board. But I think this is missing from your talks.
I think that's a very insightful question, and it's very, very relevant. One thing that I have focused on with my work as a community development manager within Joomla has been to encourage individuals that there are many aspects to a project beyond just the code. Whether that be a documentation writer or a translator or a marketing person, as was mentioned earlier. There are many aspects of a community that have to be paid attention to. And if you don't pay attention to all those aspects of a community, you will not be able to scale globally, which is, I hope, what I can give you through my talk. What I shared was that it's more about the people and what your skill sets are and how you can use your personal skill sets within a community to help it to grow. And it does not have to be code related. There are very, very few aspects of the project that only deal with code. There's many, many other ways in which people can be involved. Designers and writers and translators and artists and all sorts of artists. I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Are you doing the preaching?
The preaching of this open source?
Yes, so when I'm talking with communities specifically on how they can begin getting involved with the Joomla project, that is one of my main focus points, is to encourage people to find out what they are passionate about. Once you know what you personally are interested in and passionate about, then how can that fit into the Joomla project? How can you take what skills you have and volunteer and contribute your time? Because again, it's far more than just the code. Absolutely. Thank you for that question.
Question? Yeah, number 2.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, we can understand you now.
My name is Ismail from Ahli Bank, not from IT, that's from business. When David started talking, he said that I'm working with Joomla. I said, who's Joomla? Joomla is working with us in the bank. So I said, oh, Joomla. Then after that, I said, okay, Joomla, I have seen somewhere in the net. Then I start searching in the net. It's come Joomla.com, which is, I think, is website providers. So it's not what you are talking about it. So the second step, which is not marketing. They don't have marketing a lot. This one. The other things I want to talk about, how long Joomla should be in the market. What is the stability of it? How long it will be in the market?
So to answer your first question, Joomla.com is actually a free service that offers a hosted version of the Joomla project. So you can actually immediately begin trying and using the Joomla CMS without having to download and set up on your own server. The Joomla.org website is the community area where the project resources all live, where you can find ways to be involved in the forums and things like that. Joomla.com is more of a free service where you can actually begin using the product itself. So that answers your first question. Your second question was in regards to...
it has to do with, I think, marketing, and it's like someone is taking advantage of the Joomla to create Joomla.com.
Yeah, it's more that Joomla.com has been created as in partnership with a hosting provider that has volunteered to offer those services at no cost to the Joomla community, to anyone that's interested in becoming involved with Joomla. It was a very detailed and ongoing process to ensure that that was set up successfully and done correctly to make sure that the Joomla brand remained stable and intact. The Joomla product is free and will always be free, and it's definitely a community-driven project. It began, I think I mentioned it, in 2005, so I think we're going on the 10-year anniversary coming up in August. It's going to be a very big celebration, great time for us. We've gone through several major iterations of the software and have grown to be probably one of the most stable, most secure CMS systems you'll find on the market today.
Okay, while we wait for the next question, Matthias, I just read a week ago on BBC.com an article by one of the internet pioneers that he's afraid of a digital dark age, so that if in year 3000 people try to search what people in the year 2000 were doing, they'll have no idea because everything is digital, everything is non-standards or stored in some weird format, and we have people will have no recollection what happened during this age. He's afraid of the dark age. So how is this sustainability can be in open source or open formats assist in these?
Well, there are certain different layers. So there's the discussion about digital preservation, which you mentioned, basically for the future in the long term, that archives or documents are available also in 1,000 years. I must admit I'm not very into this, but here they're also about hardware. So on what type of hardware do you store the information? And there's a lot of research being on, and the National Archives, that's their main concern, that the information is stored. My concern is basically a layer on top of it. It's about the software, the formats. And here, I think I'm very convinced that only open standard, open format is really on a long term sustainable. It cannot be that there's some proprietary Photoshop, whatever, format which can be read in maybe only 5 years from now. No one can read it anymore. So here it's important that you have specification of a standard completely open, as Jan Wildeborg mentioned yesterday, without any fees, without any patent claims and so on. And then actually it's being implemented in hopefully several applications.
Questions? No hands. Okay, David, I have a question on how is it managed, strategic planning for the open community. For example, in any community, you have certain goals, certain vision, what you're going to achieve. But how is it done in a community which is diverse across all over the place? How is that done?
That is a great question, and probably one of the most difficult questions within an open source community, such as what Joomla is. Because with Joomla, it's completely volunteer driven. So there's no single entity or individual that makes those decisions for the community. And so as such, it becomes a very difficult task, as was mentioned earlier, in how you motivate developers to code to a certain spec when that spec is to be defined by the global community. And so what has been done in the past, and which has proven to be somewhat successful, is to have one of the leadership teams involved with the production. So the production leadership team is in charge of releasing the code. And what they try to do is determine from the community input what features and what interests are most applicable to the product, and then hopefully encourage developers to code features to those particular issues. So it really in Joomla has been sort of a community, almost like a voting type of situation, where what are the interests of the community at large, and how can we encourage developers to code to those interests? Definitely a challenge. Definitely something that becomes quite tricky.
We still have a few minutes for any questions before the coffee break. All right then, thank you very much. Thank you all. And the coffee break will be outside. Yeah. So we'll close the session, and the coffee break will be just outside. Thank you very much.